Hi, this is Randall Schwartz, host of Floss Weekly. This week, Michael Tunnell joins me. We're going to be talking about AI, open source AI that can answer questions for you from a speaker. You're not going to want to miss this, so stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Floss Weekly with Randall Schwartz and Michael Tunnell. Episode 525, recorded April 10th, 2019, Mycroft. This episode of Floss Weekly is brought to you by Pulseway, the ridiculously cool IT management software that lets you remotely monitor and control IT systems from any device. It's enabling busy admins to fix issues on the go and be more productive. Try it free for 14 days at pulseway.com/twit. And by DigitalOcean. Deploy your apps on the simplest cloud platform with no surprises. Join a community of over 3.5 million developers on DigitalOcean. Sign up today and receive a free $100 credit at do.co/twit. It's time for Floss Weekly, the show about free, libre, open source software. I am your host, Randall Schwartz, Merlin@Stonehenge.com, bringing you each week the movers, the shakers, the big projects, little projects, projects you may have never heard of but might want to download and play with right after this show, which I think today is going to be one of those. Projects you may be using every day and not aware of it. This also could eventually be true for this particular project, so that'll be pretty fun. Joining me once again, back after a long absence, I think, Michael, last name, Michael, it's not there. Michael, welcome back to the show. Michael Tunnell.
Thank you for having me. There we go. Yeah.
You know, you've only been you were a guest once, and you've been a co-host, I think, only twice now. Is this
twice?
The second
yeah,
time?
Twice. This is my third time as a co-host.
Awesome. Well, welcome back. I am speaking to you from what we call the Tijuana kitchen set, because you can see the refrigerator with all the magnets that haven't been moved in 5 years over there. And if I duck down, you could see the stove and stuff, but I'm not going to do that because it's silly. And hopefully we got good bandwidth today. Hopefully the Telnor, which is the local cable company, does not cut out on us at all. They're usually pretty good. I stream stuff all night, and I've always been pretty happy with that. And where are you speaking to us from, Michael?
From the movers and shakers capital of Alabama.
Oh, right. Awesome. So today we're going to be joined in a few minutes by Joshua Montgomery. So we're going to be talking about Mycroft, which is the world's first open source assistant. So of course we're having a lot more of these AI assistants like Alexa and Google Assistant and what's the other one, Siri, things like that. But they're all closed source. They're all proprietary stuff that's tied to a particular set of hardware. So the thing about Mycroft is that what they're developing is something that runs anywhere except on a Mac. So I couldn't get to play with this first. On a desktop computer, inside an automobile, or on a Raspberry Pi. This is open source software which can be freely remixed, extended, and improved. And Mycroft can be used in anything from a science project to an enterprise software application. That was the blurb that was on their website when I last was able to see their website. Unfortunately, I had a little problem overnight. So they say they're fixing it. So hopefully the URLs we're posting today will be up again later today. So what do you know about this so far? I know you've been tracking the project for a while.
Yeah, I've been actually a fan of the project for a long time. When they first announced it a couple of years ago with the first Kickstarter campaign for the Mark I, I started following it since then, and I've covered it on my my podcast as well. And it's a really interesting project because not only does it have their own products, they also allow you to do it desktop integration. So like, for example, I'm a KDE Plasma user, and they have a integration system, so you can have it directly into your system like the other platforms.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like a lot of fun. And again, I wish I could have played with it on my Mac desktop before the show, but eventually I'm sure they'll have Mac. It's just, not all the world is Linux, by the way, guys. Not all of us are running Linux, and I'm definitely not running that anymore.
We'll fix that. Don't worry.
No, you're not. Well, if there was I didn't look, but if there was a Docker image, I could have run it there, I guess, but I didn't see a Docker image, but I maybe didn't look hard. It doesn't matter. Anyway, so let's get on with the show, because before we bring our Joshua on, let's talk about how we're paying the bills today. Because this episode of Floss Weekly is brought to you by Pulseway. Imagine being able to manage and control your entire IT environment from the palm of your hand. Reset a user's password from your phone, or kill a process that's slowing down a critical machine while taking a stroll in the park. Well, you don't need to imagine. Pulseway lets you monitor, manage, and control all your Windows, Linux, and Mac systems from anywhere using any device, including your smartphone. You can monitor everything. See real-time status, system resources, and logged-in users. View network performance, Windows updates, IIS, SQL Server, Exchange, and Active Directory. You can monitor VMware, Hyper-V, and SNMP-enabled devices, and more. Always be in control, able to react to issues right away and fix problems on the go. You can run commands in terminal, manage running processes, restart services, apply critical updates, restart systems, etc. Automate everything by creating and deploying custom scripts to automate all your IT tasks, saving time and increasing your overall efficiency. You can automate everything from backup jobs to security checks on schedule or on demand at any time from the device closest to you. With Patch Management, you can scan, install, and update all your systems on the go. You can do it on demand or schedule it to be executed on a particular date. Quickly and effortlessly connect to a computer as if you were sitting right in front of it without opening any ports or creating any firewall rules with their remote desktop control. It switches between screens, sends keystrokes, and controls the mouse without having to travel to the machine. Visit Pulseway.com/twit and learn how thousands of organizations and sysadmins are making their IT environment more efficient and secure. Try it for free for 14 days at Pulseway.com/TWIT. And we thank Pulseway for their support and sponsorship of Floss Weekly. Let's go ahead and bring in our guests. Joshua, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Cool. And where are you speaking to us from?
I am speaking from our prototyping facility here in Lawrence, Kansas, adjacent to the University of Kansas.
Lawrence, Kansas. I think that's more that way. I think I'll wave in your general direction over here somewhere. It's sort of east of me, northeast of me, actually, I'd probably say. So give us a 30,000-foot view. When somebody's reaching for Mycroft, what problem are they trying to solve?
Sure. So voice is becoming an increasingly important part of the HMI. I'm sure that many of your listeners use technologies like Google Assistant and Alexa to solve problems every day. Sometimes those problems are playing a piece of music. A lot of people are using voice now for search. And increasingly, as the technology continues to mature, you're going to start seeing voice assistants in call centers, in customer service applications. You're going to start seeing people build their own personalized voice assistants. We provide that technology for everybody who doesn't want to send all of their personal data to our friends at Google or Amazon or Apple.
Okay, so there's just a couple of different levels of this, and I want to see how far Mycroft has gotten into each side of this. So the main thing that seems the most magical to me is the ability to recognize, English spoken phrases or native language spoken phrases. I'm sure that's also going to be an issue either now or down the road. So to analyze, pull apart what I'm saying and understand it semantically. The other is that whatever system we have has to have, feelers into, like my phone or my desktop to be able to control all the things that seem like they need controlling from my voice. Is that a fair statement of the two biggest problems here?
Yeah, I mean, the natural language understanding is actually the easier of the two major problems in the technology stack. The big one is converting speech to text at enough accuracy so that the technology can actually transcribe what you're saying. That takes a lot of data to do it for full language. And, although there are exposed APIs from a variety of different companies that do that, all of those APIs have a cost associated with them. And then in many cases, they compromise your privacy, right? So you're taking audio from your home or your car or your bedroom or your business and sending it to a third party to be transcribed. And, that's kind of innocuous when it's turn the lights on in the kitchen, a little less innocuous when you might be having a conversation about finances or romances, right? That's a big problem. Certainly natural language understanding, so dissecting the text to figure out what the intent of the user is a challenging problem. And then, even something as simple as wake word spotting, so being able to identify when somebody in the room says, "Hey, Mycroft," turns out to be a fairly difficult problem to solve accurately, right? In order for these technologies to be useful and not inadvertently activate every 5 minutes, they have to be very, very accurate and use a lot of data. And then finally, of course, what you're talking about, the skills abstraction, the idea that you can interface this technology with your car or your phone or the lights in your home or your Spotify account. Managing all those credentials across a number of different devices is a challenge as well. So I would classify the problem as non-trivial, and
Okay.
there's a couple of underlying problems that the free and open source community it really didn't have solutions for before we came along, and one of them is how to collect and use large data sets to implement machine learning solutions while respecting the open source ethos and preserving people's privacy. That's a difficult problem.
So what approach did you take to that?
Sure. For us, we chose to deploy a smart speaker into the real world where we could collect data from people who are using it. But because we have this focus on privacy and openness, by default, we set it up so that we don't collect any information about the people using the technology. So, if you put a Mycroft smart speaker in your kitchen, it doesn't actually store any of the audio or any of the uses that you make of that speaker. But we did give our community a path to donate that information. And we have right about 15% of our community has chosen to donate the data that they're generating by using the tech to the broader community. And that gives us big data stores from which we can train the machine learning algorithm. The other thing we did is build a strong partnership with our friends at Mozilla. Their Common Voice project, we've been taking the data that's donated to us, making it available to Mozilla so that they can improve the underlying state of the speech-to-text algorithm with the deep speech effort that's been going on in Berlin.
So you've obviously got some upstream projects you're using to make this. You're just bringing together a bunch of things, right? What are you using upstream, and what are you contributing originally?
Sure. So the original products that live inside of Mycroft, Precise is our wake word spotter. That uses a recurrent neural network to analyze audio in the room. It uses 100,000 utterances donated by our community and a machine learning model. That piece of software was developed by Matthew Sheffield, one of our team members, and then it's maintained by him and the broader community. So that is a Mycroft project. On the speech-to-text side of things, we have been contributing and using Mozilla's Deep Speech project. So we contribute real-world data. They also have a great website. I'd love to have your listeners go and have a look at it. It's voice.mozilla.org, where community members can go and donate voice samples and then also tag voice samples. Where Mozilla's effort is really useful is in an environment like the one you and I are in right now. So sitting in front of a computer with a microphone close to your mouth in a relatively noise-free environment, it's collecting data from people who are donating that way. Unfortunately, the use cases for this technology in many places are places where there's noise. You've got a smart speaker, sitting in a kitchen with, the dog barking, the dishwasher on, the kids screaming in the background, and you're trying to get it to play Enya so that you can calm down. In that scenario, the smart speakers that we've deployed in the real world are able to collect data from donors and contribute that to Common Voice, so it gets better at spotting text or spotting speech within those audio samples. The next piece of our stack is the natural language understanding piece. We've developed two projects in-house. The first was originally developed by Sean Fitzgerald. Sean was the first technical hire at Siri and the second engineer assigned to the Echo project when Amazon stood it up. Sean built Adapt, which is a known entity rules-based intent parser. So Adapt is very good at spotting intent within phrases where it has known objects. A good example of that would be turn the lights on in the kitchen. Lights would be in the object database. On would be in the toggle position database. Kitchen would be in a location database. And so it's able to spot those words and say, hey, this person is looking to set a toggle position for an object in a location. Aha, that's an IoT request. And it sends the structured data to the IoT skill, which then might reach out to Smart Things Hub and trigger a smart light switch. Where Adapt really fails is in applications like make it brighter where I cook, right? Where there are no known entities in the phrase, but a human would interpret that as, hey, this person wants to turn on the lights in the kitchen. So we have a second library that we built in-house called Pedacious. Pedacious takes a long list of example phrases, compiles them into a machine learning algorithm, and then is capable of spotting intents with in language where it really doesn't have any known objects. Attached to that is another project which we've been working on lately where we'd love to have more in community involvement, which is called Persona. What Persona does is it captures intents from the community that we couldn't handle, right? So when somebody says, what's your favorite color, right? If Mycroft doesn't have an answer for that, it gets fed into the Persona engine, and then the community can come up with an answer. So somebody might suggest blue, somebody else might choose fuchsia. The community comes together in a at the end of the development cycle in a process similar to Wikipedia, comes to a consensus and feeds the response into the Persona engine, which then gets compiled into a machine learning model. And over time, as more and more people ask questions that it can't answer, as more and more people use phrases like "make it brighter where I cook," we collect more and more data and can improve the underlying personality. That data set also becomes available to the public so that you, as a Mycroft user, can take the vanilla persona and then customize it. So, down in Alabama, Roll Tide, right? Like your favorite color might be red, for one community, and then for another community, that it might be orange, right? And so it allows you to customize the personality and the persona as an individual, but then also importantly for brands, so that they can create personas that are on brand for their retail or their car automaker or whatever. We did a lot of work with Jaguar Land Rover. We accepted some funding from them. And in their case, they were interested in a voice assistant that's British, sassy, and sarcastic, because that's the brand that they want to present as a British automaker. Persona, when it's fully implemented, will give companies the ability to do that. And then finally, we have a speech synthesis engine called Mimic. It's based on some work by Keith Ito, who took the original Google Tacotron speech synthesis module paper, reduced it to practice, and then we've since taken that over and have paid artists to contribute audio to that. What Mimic does is it basically takes a big chunk of audio and it creates a digital model of that person's voice. The newer models are identifiably the original speaker. So, if you're listening out there, James Earl Jones, we would love to have you come in and read 20 hours of audio so that we can add the voice of Darth Vader. But we can mimic the voice of any donor. Our original voice was Kusal the intern, because he was the only person on the team who had enough time to spend 20 hours in a sound booth. But we've recently retained a really talented female artist who's doing an American female voice. And very interestingly, Mimic doesn't care about the text or the audio. All it's doing is connecting through machine learning a block of text with a WAV file. So we can create a Mimic version for any language that has a Unicode character set. So that means that Mimic can be used for Chinese, for Japanese, for any of the Romance languages. And then very importantly, it can be used to capture languages that are in danger of going extinct. So languages like Welsh, like Maori, like Hawaiian, like Cherokee. We have the ability through Mimic to capture native speakers of those languages and archive it and use it in voice assistant technology. So we have forked a couple projects. So I would consider, I think the Mimic, we took it over more than forked it, honestly. Keith came to work for us for a while and helped with that transition. In Mozilla, that's a partnership, but the rest of it really we've stood up in-house. The final piece of our tech is home.mycroft.ai, which is where we proxy the request. So your smart speaker, when you ask it to go play music, it needs a set of credentials to do that. It reaches out to home.mycroft.ai, which then feeds it credentials so it can go out to Spotify and spans those credentials across all your instances. So you only have to put in your information once. It also acts as a proxy so that, from a privacy perspective, if we're using a third-party API like Wolfram, which we use for a lot of Q&A answers, they don't have visibility of you. Right, so they can't say that this IP address asked about, the future price of Twitter or whatever. That gets aggregated amongst the entire community and gives people some anonymity in their use and some additional privacy. So that was a very long-winded answer. I hope it kind of explains the broader stack. Certainly, The website is active. We had a glitch this morning, which I will fully own was a security glitch, and took it down for a couple hours while the team resolved it. So.
Well, if you ever need a voice from your favorite frog, please let me know. I would be very happy. You have my email address, so please let me know.
If you have 20 hours of Kermit in you, we would certainly be interested.
Someday we'll find it, the Rainbow Connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me.
Anyway, there you go.
That's my favorite voice to do at karaoke, so I do it a lot. Anyway, and that's not warmed up. When I'm warm up, I go into the bathroom for like 4 or 5 minutes and just start quoting things, until it sounds exactly right. And I've been told that my performance is spot on. There was a karaoke club in downtown L.A. that the hostess actually came up after me and said, "Are you the guy?" Because, in L.A., anybody could be anybody, right? You don't know.
Yeah.
And I said, "Could I tell you if I was?" And she runs up and goes, "It's him, it's him, it's him."
Excellent.
My favorite karaoke experience. I was so spot on. And actually, if you Google for Randall Schwartz Rainbow Connection, you'll find, I think, a YouTube video that has me doing that performance. So feel free to do that. I'm lost the question I was going to ask. Okay, so obviously you're on this show. So there's a lot of this is open source. Is it all open source? And if so, what is your profit model?
So everything is open source except for Home, the back end. We have an intention of open sourcing it in the future, but right now the concept is we give away free beer. All of the core modules are open source. So speech synthesis, NLU, even the data sets are open. We give away free beer on the back end. So if you have a single device or want 3 or 4 devices, you can go to home.mycroft.ai, add the devices, and then we manage all the back and forth to the APIs. If you want a glass, it's free. If you want a keg, we charge you. So for companies, for hotels, for hospital chains, for retailers, for others that want to deploy our software stack at scale. So they might want to ship a smart speaker, in hospitality. They might want to voice enable their hotel rooms. In hospitals, they're looking at using our technology in surgical suites and in patient care. In those cases, there's a fee associated with it. And then we do encourage people who use our free backend to become paid supporters. That's $2 a month. I mean, it won't even buy you a Starbucks. We're getting about an 8% buy-in there. So as we deploy on additional platforms, we have an Android app that's in the works. We have, in theory, there'll be Windows applications, an iOS installer sometime in the future, and we get access to these broader communities, and our numbers stand up. If we can continue converting community members into paid supporters, we can actually pay the bills that way.
Awesome. And we do have a question from the chat room. I think I recognize his name, Jay Bennett. That sounds really like one of our other co-hosts, and I know he was going to be hanging out in the chat room. And it's actually very apropos given how you just said that. So does Mycroft require a connection to their cloud? And isn't that just swapping trust in Google and Apple for trust in Mycroft?
We don't require it. There is a Mycroft home server effort that the community is engaged in that's led by a community member named Jarvis. That does work. For people that want to stand up a home server and have the expertise to do it, we don't prevent it. We're not putting in place any tools or any encryption that would discourage it. But the reality is that most consumers want something that they can simply go, click, set it up, and forget about it. And unlike our friends at Google and Amazon, who have a very checkered past when it comes to user privacy and abusing user data and, influencing global elections, allowing autocrats to become into power. I mean, there's a lot of things that have happened in Silicon Valley. We have a commitment to privacy and have worked to build a reputation and live up to that. In terms of Apple, I think that they have done a good job with privacy, and they really understand the ethos that our customer is our customer, and we're not going to sell that customer to a third party. However, there's a limit to the number of people that can afford to pay upwards of $300 for a smart speaker on one page, and then the other is, Apple's ecosystem has traditionally struggled with open, and so. We'd encourage people who are interested in privacy to kind of look at our technology and look at our history of respecting user privacy and kind of make a judgment for themselves.
That's interesting, and I was just curious. Since we were talking about the open source aspect to it, it's a very interesting thing that you approached it as open source from the start, instead of doing like, you're talking about the home server being eventually going to be able to like host it yourself. But what's the motivation you had to actually just start with open source?
Well, we looked at this early on, and Alexa wasn't a thing, and Google, we shipped the Mark 1 before Google shipped the Google Home, right? We were doing this before Amazon made it cool, effectively. And when we originally stood up, the big players in this space were Ubi out of Toronto, which you guys can search for if you want to. It's no longer really relevant. Jibo, which raised upwards of $70 million reportedly and recently folded up. There was one called Cubic out there that had recently done a successful Kickstarter. In every case, they were closed and proprietary. And, a couple things. So I'm talking to you through my Wicked broadband internet connection. Our prototyping facility is co-located with the ISP that I built. And going all the way back to the beginning of Wicked, Wicked was a community mesh network initially, a nonprofit, with the idea being that we could bring the internet to everyone regardless of income, and we could do it as a community effort. That ethos really spilled over into Mycroft. The idea that this technology is going to be way more important than people understand, even today. Like today, it's the fastest growing segment of the technology sector, bar none. It's growing faster than smartphones, grew in 2007, 2008, 2009, literally the fastest adopted technology in the history of mankind is voice assistants, right? And they are that because it is the most natural human interface, right? When we're out hunting deer with, spears and knives, we communicate by speaking or yelling, maybe hand signals. You wouldn't send a text message to a group of hunters when you're trying to take down a bison. You would speak. And because it's so natural, it's being adopted very quickly. And the technology is changing really, really fast. If you look at Google's duplex demo that they did last year, Google's voice assistant can now get on the phone with a restaurant or a hair care center and book you an appointment or a table so naturally that the person on the other end of the phone doesn't know they're speaking to a voice AI, right? Now, fast forward that technology 10 years, and you're going to have voice assistants that are capable of having a conversation about the influence of Nietzschean philosophy on 20th century warfare and have a meaningful conversation and educate you about how Nietzsche played into the rise of Nazi Germany. And in a world where that type of technology is available, a whole host of jobs become redundant, right? Like every call center job globally almost will disappear. There's tons of other customer service applications. There's people using our stack in the legal profession. I mean, it really is world changing. And, given that the technology is that important, it's critical for competitive reasons that everybody have equal access to it, whether you're building a voice assistant that you're going to work with day to day in your own personal life, or you're a big company that competes against Google and Amazon that wants to deploy voice technology in your call centers. It's important that you have an independent technology that's open that these companies can adapt, because we've already had so much wealth concentration in Google, in Apple, in Amazon, that ceding this important market segment to those three companies really just further drives consolidation of our economy and could cause a lot of other problems.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Most of your points, actually. But I was just kind of curious, as you said that it's kind of becoming a world-changing aspect. What do you think is the biggest misconception people have about AI in general?
I think people overestimate what it can do today and vastly underestimate what it's going to do in 15 years. And so, there's a lot of, navel gazing and hair pulling out there in the press about like AI coming to conquer everything near term. I view modern machine learning as kind of an enhanced form of human intelligence on a, I have to be careful how I say this because I want to make sure that I'm respectful of everybody. It's basically a computer system that mimics somebody who has severe autism with a focus on a specific on a specific item. So if you look at somebody who's on the autism spectrum who has a focus on maybe Disney would be one example, but some people who have autism focus on animal husbandry, or they focus on aerospace, or they focus on trains, right? That's a human mind that has developed in a way where that person pays really, really close attention to one thing, and at the expense of other parts of their personality or other parts of their life. An author by the name of Werner Vinge wrote a fantastic book about this called Deepness in the Sky, where there's a whole society that they deliberately change people to become focused on some specific thing and then basically use them as a form of automation. AI is very similar to that. It's an intelligence that's human level or above, but it can only do one really super narrow thing. So it can classify images, but nothing else, or it can replicate speech, but nothing else. And that's not as threatening as it might be. However, 15 years down the line, when you're speaking to voice assistants and they really have put all of this together into an experience that is effectively human equivalent, you can talk to a voice assistant and not tell you're speaking to a person or not. That is going to be extraordinarily disruptive across hundreds of industries, if not thousands.
And that's a very interesting point. And like the amount of change that's going to happen through voice assistants and AI in general is just immense, really. But I wanted to turn it to a little bit of a fun question right here, because when you in your video you can see the different products for the Mark I and the Mark II. The Mark I is like a quirky design, and the Mark II is more professional, stylized design. What did you learn from the product development from going from Mark I to Mark II?
That is a fantastic question. So this is a fancy Mark I that Darren, our production head, he painted it with reflective pearl paint. It's a pretty version. You can see the white one that we ship by default in the poster behind me. So the Mark I was based on Raspberry Pi. So if you look at the back of the Mark I, you can see we've got the Pi there. We've exposed the 4 USB ports. It's got an Ethernet port. We exposed the HDMI, and then we also sent RCA out through the little sound card that we built inside it. And then we also built an LED faceplate that allowed us to do a bunch of things that are anthropomorphic. So, when the Mark I is sitting on the counter and nobody's talked to it for a little while, the eyes, the top half go dead and the bottom half go dim, its eyes are closed and it's sleeping. When you speak to it, the eyes open and you can see that it's listening. It allowed us to use a lot of human type cues with the interaction between the technology and the person using the technology. The insides of this, we made some pretty significant mistakes. So you can see the speaker grill on the top. We basically screwed a really nice driver to the bottom of that, but we didn't seal the other side, and we didn't seal the enclosure. And so it sounds really, really tinny, is one issue. Instead of using modern noise cancellation, beamforming, far-field mic array, we basically put a condenser mic on the front. And so it's not really very good at spotting the wake word at a distance. Now, in fairness, we did that on purpose because we wanted to build wake word spotting software that was capable of working on hardware that we didn't control. So on a phone or on a TV or something else. So we wanted basically the worst microphone possible so that the wake word spotting software would work in the worst case scenario. And then, of course, we can enhance that by adding better microphones. And then, we learned a lot about just the overall fabrication process. And so we brought a lot of those lessons to the Mark II. On the Mark II, we added it turns out that it's actually cheaper to put an LCD screen on it than it is this color LED screen, just because smartphones have made these LCD screens. They're made in such huge scale. The price advantages are pretty significant. In the case of the Mark II, we learned a ton about speaker drivers. So this has a an audio enclosure with a bass port in it, and they sound really, really, really good. We actually took some lumps on the Mark II recently, which if you're a community member, you'll know. We originally designed it to use a single PCB that we were working with a dev shop to build. So all of the various this has 5 separate PCBs in it, right? We're connected with cables. In this case, it was 2, right? And the second PCB is just for the little camera module, which was off the shelf. And we really struggled with our integrator to build a board that booted and worked properly. So the integrator had tons of problems with heat, tons of problems with drivers. Like it just was a significant challenge. And we actually finally pulled the plug with that integrator in January and moved to a off-the-shelf solution. So going forward, that's going to use the Mark II that we ship will use a Rock 64. This is actually a Respeaker version 2. This is commercial off the shelf. You can buy this from Seed Studios. We're probably going to actually end up using a Pine 64 single board computer instead of this to run all of the underlying software. And then this is the microphone board, which is a Respeaker Microarray. This is once again off the shelf. All of the noise cancellation beamforming stuff is in this PCB, and then we're going to add a power card. And that, since we've made that change here in the last couple of months, our development process has accelerated dramatically. And I'm told that they will have me a real working Mark II in plastics by Monday of next week. Cross fingers, and then we're going to start doing short production runs and kind of start moving towards full-scale production. So lots of lessons learned on the hardware side. And then, of course, on the software side, we actually employ no electrical engineers. All of the hardware is out of shop. Our design staff makes plastics and is working with quality and stuff, but we're effectively a software company. So the software team has learned a ton about machine learning, development cycles, on and on and on and on, bug spotting, security, and so forth.
Well, I know Michael's got some more questions, and I have some more questions, and I can't let Michael have all the fun. And we have questions in the chat room still to get to, but before we do that, I do have a very important message, because this episode of Floss Weekly is brought to you by DigitalOcean. Easily run production applications with DigitalOcean, a scalable compute platform with add-on storage, security, and monitoring capabilities. Whether you're running one virtual machine or 10,000, DigitalOcean has you covered with the flexibility to customize standard or CPU-optimized droplets. Set up SSD-based virtual machines in 55 seconds or less. Capture backups and snapshots. DigitalOcean is designed for developers. The easy-to-use control panel and API lets developers spend more time coding and less time managing their infrastructure. Use Kubernetes to improve availability, scalability, and resource efficiency of containerized apps. Over 2,000 open-source tutorials available for developers. On DigitalOcean's marketplace, discover and deploy pre-configured one-click applications, including LAMP, Docker, GitLab, Jenkins, Plesk, cPanel, WordPress, and many more. Find an application that suits your case, then spin it up on a droplet in 60 seconds or less. Industry-leading price performance. Access the compute resources you need at the lowest rates, saving up to 55% compared to other cloud providers. Know what you'll pay monthly with predictable and straightforward billing. And included at no additional cost, monitoring and alerts, 99.99% uptime SLA, team accounts, cloud firewalls, full DNS management, 12 global data centers. Data centers located around the world mean you have the connectivity and redundancy you need to provide the best service to your customers. 24/7, 365 world-class support. DigitalOcean is trusted by over 1 million developers. Go to do.co/twit today, sign up and receive a free $100 credit. That's do.co/TWIT for a free $100 credit. DigitalOcean, designed for developers, built for businesses, and we thank DigitalOcean for their support of Floss Weekly. So, as you were talking about how the AI is moving forward, and right now it's sort of like someone with a very narrow focus, somebody on the spectrum probably with a particular focus. I'm thinking back to '67. I'm old enough to remember the original Star Trek when it came out, and how fascinating that computer was that they could talk to. Are we there yet? Are we going to get there? How long do you think it'll take?
Sure. So I would say that the experience of the Star Trek computer is already here. I mean, if you look at the original science fiction, certainly the original series, but even in the next generation, the computer is really used in very limited ways. They use it to answer a few questions, control the ship. I would argue that the modern voice assistants are able to provide a very similar experience today, up to and including the authentication, which I would argue in Google's case is probably better than it was on the Enterprise, because you don't have to give your password clear text. And that really has been the inspiration, right? Like for us, we run a makerspace here in Lawrence, and we wanted to voice enable the place, and Echo didn't exist. Siri wasn't extensible. We come from this open background. The technology is possible. Somebody's going to build it. Why not us? I mean, that's really the question. I also wanted to double down on your sponsor, DigitalOcean. They're a Techstars company. They have a startup program for any of your listeners that are working or thinking about doing a startup. If you work with a participating accelerator, they gave us $100,000 worth of credits and allowed us to ride their infrastructure for almost 2 years for free as we stood up the stack. We've been super happy with them. And then, one of the big advantages there is that you're not sending your data to AWS. Our friends in Seattle have a long history of collecting data from the customers that use their systems and then deploying that data to later on compete with those customers. I think that people should think twice before they deploy on AWS personally. But of course, that's my opinion.
Of course, you're asking me to be paranoid now, but I probably should be anyway. I mean, given that I know that all the voice stuff from Alexa was being sent to that big warehouse, and I think it was in Virginia, their big compute facility, that it doesn't seem unlikely that the large companies all have some sort of hidden agenda beyond what they tell us that they are. And I've always been told that if the product is free, you're not getting the product. You are the product. It's you that they're selling, not the product. So just back to the enterprise question again, though. So the enterprise computer interactions were sometimes just command and control, open the gates, whatever like that. But occasionally, and these are the ones I laughed the most at, being already a self-trained computer programmer, was the ones where they would say, hypothetically speaking, and then Kirk would give some complicated set of theory, or Spock would give a complicated theory, and the computer would have, possible as a response. Are we there yet? Because that's a lot more than just command and control.
Yeah, so we wrote a really, I thought it was interesting. Other people may have different opinions. We wrote a paper 6 months ago or a year ago on an approach to build what's called a strong AI. So a weak AI is narrowly focused. It's only capable of the things you program it to do. It doesn't learn, right? Other than within its focus, right? If you feed it more audio data, it'll get better at understanding English, but it's never going to be able to, talk about Nietzsche, right? And so we wrote a paper on how you would go about building a strong AI. And our approach here, and a strong AI is something that effectively thinks, right? Like when you speak to it, you can't tell whether or not you're speaking to a machine, and therefore, by definition, it's alive. It thinks, right? Mm-hmm. Actually, that's our motto.
Turing test. That's the Turing test.
That's our motto. I think I speak, therefore I think therefore I am, right? That's our company motto. So the persona tool that we've been building is really our effort to crowdsource that. So the idea is that if we can capture enough interactions, and if we have a broad enough community tagging those interactions and structuring them so that a computer can use machine learning to train on the data, that eventually you end up with enough interactions and enough data that when people speak to it, they can't tell it's a machine. And regardless of what's going on in the background, in my mind, that's the definition of a strong AI. Now, it may or may not be able to imagine things, right? But if it can simulate imagining things well enough that you, when you're speaking to it, think that it imagined things, effectively, it doesn't matter how it happened. It has an imagination, right? And so the idea behind Persona is that we can take all of this data coming back from people interacting with a real world AI that's really designed to try and simulate a person, like a person and a speaker, right? if we can get enough people involved in creating the data and enough people involved in tagging and classifying the data, that eventually we can build a machine learning model that passes Turing. I'm 100% convinced it's possible. I'm 95% convinced that our approach is the correct approach, or one correct approach. And I'm also convinced that Google, Amazon, and the others see this. I mean, it's the holy grail of computing, right? A computer that works as well as a person. Now, to really cook your noodle, I do have one thing to add to that. If you're speaking to a computer and after interacting with it for days, weeks, or months, you really can't tell that it's not a person inside the machine, does it have rights? Can you own it? Can you own a person? Is it a person? Like, these are all questions that we're not really equipped to deal with right now, but eventually we're going to need to deal with them.
Yeah, like the iRobot scenario and stuff. There's actually, so talking back about the Star Trek thing, I'm kind of curious because you talk about the persona and thing, and I know this is kind of silly, but will it be possible to have an interface for LCARs on the Mycroft products?
I'm going to demonstrate some ignorance. Can you explain to me what
LCARs is? The interface that's on the Star Trek, all the touchscreen stuff that they have.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've already added a screen to the new device that's going to have a bunch of touch components, and then, of course, you use KDE on your desktop. Blue Systems has been enormously way supportive of our effort, putting a lot of full-time resources into helping us to build the GUI. We're building this GUI interface to go along with the voice interface in a way that it'll run on a wearable, on a smart speaker, on a full screen, seamlessly, and you'll be able to do all kinds of really cool, touchscreen type stuff while interacting with the AI.
Very nice. So I'm curious about the way that you handle the optimization of the questions. Or the responses mainly. So in the past, there was a funny video that was kind of highlighting some strange responses that was happening in the early days of the Mark I, where there was a question about beans, for example. How do you handle the providing the best responses while also optimizing the content that is provided for, say, a Wikipedia page or something?
Sure. So a lot of our default QA, so if it falls through all of the built-in skills and we just don't know what to do with it, we'll dump it into Wolfram Alpha, which is really funny because it's very clear that Apple does the exact same thing. So if you ask Siri, why is a fire truck red? It goes into this long, sort of monologue joke as to why fire trucks are red. And I encourage people to do that. If you ask Mycroft the same question, we give the same answer, because we're using the same API for a lot of the backend intelligence for the Q&A. For us, we run through all of our built-in skills. We have a focus right now called 8+2, where the top 8 skills are really where we're focused. So timers, alarms, music, Wikipedia, general Q&A, and then the +2 is IoT, and then the other piece is the setup process. We're really focused on trying to make it more friendly for grandma to set up effectively. It goes through our skill set, and if it can't find an answer, it goes out to Wolfram, and we basically ingest whatever Wolfram feeds us.
That's awesome. I mean, Wolfram Alpha is really cool too, so that's really awesome to hear. We have a question from the chat room also. Jay Bennett also asked, how difficult is it to add integration for a custom device, like a temperature sensor or a Wi-Fi light switch?
Super, super easy. You have access to the Linux distro, you have root access to your smart speaker. It's not like the proprietary ones where it's who knows what's going on inside of it. So, you can access local hardware. If you've, everything's a text file in Linux, right? So, pop open whatever in proc is holding that sensor reading and ingest it into your skill. If you write it even remotely well in Python, you can stand up a Hello World skill in Mycroft in less than an hour and be doing something really cool in less than 2 hours. We've had corporate developers at bigger corporates be able to plug in complete backend CRM systems in 3 hours. I mean, it's really been designed to be extensible.
Very nice. I mean, there's actually things that I wanted to do when I first saw the work on the skills for with the Python approach with Mycroft stuff, is that the ability to tell Mycroft to play a a video or some music on Kodi, for example. Is that something that can be done, or is it available now or in the future, or like a community approach?
There's a community skill related to Kodi, I believe. You'd have to. We have a skills store that's all searchable and everything. You'd have to go have a play with it. But even in the original demos of the Mycroft stack, going all the way back to 15, where it was like the entire stack was like 50 lines of Python. I had it set up to go out and grab the Deadpool trailer when I told it. So I'd say play Deadpool, and it would grab the trailer, run up, cast now, send it to the Chromecast on the TV here in the conference room, and boom, there's Deadpool. It really is, because you do have access to all of the local systems, because you do have access to the local Linux kernel. If you can do it with the shell script, you can do it with Mycroft, and I have yet to run into anything you can't do with the shell script. We could replace Congress. We could replace Congress with a small shell script. I'd probably do a better job.
True. So I'm curious, like the way that you're so involved in the community and the open source aspects to it. What do you find is like the best way to find people to work, like specifically in the community, and also to like work for Mycroft? Like, how do you find people to join the team?
Okay, so full-time employees, we generally draw from the community, and they're usually people that have made significant contributions, and have really shined. So Matthew Sheffield, who did all the work in Precise and did a lot of the work in Pedacious. So we asked to have a problem solved, and I can't remember what the problem was, but we went out to the community and we were like, hey, we need this solved, and my internal dev said, hey, this is like a month of full-time work, and it showed up solved the next morning, and we're like, I wonder who did that. Wow. So we reached out to Matthew, and I got him on the phone, and I found out about him, and he's like, hey, I'm a junior, and I love computer science, and I was kind of curious, so I went out and I saw that you had this problem and you were going to give a free Mark 1, so I solved it. And I was like, great, like a junior, awesome. So why don't you, between your junior and senior years, come work for us as an intern, and then when you graduate from college, you can come work for us full time. And he says, well, I have to ask my mom. I'm a junior in high school, right? And so we did bring him in for an internship between his junior and senior year in high school, and then he took a gap year with us full time between high school and college, and he's now at Champaign-Urbana in Illinois, and is still an employee with Mycroft. We're hoping to see him full time this summer, but that's how we bring people in, people who shine, who are really interested in contributing, and who are A players and want to come and play with the team, and then Gez. Chris Gessling, who's in Darwin, Australia, which he may or may not be up by now, but Gez is our community manager, and so he spends his days interacting with the community and trying to encourage people to solve the problems that we need solved, not necessarily the problems that they might be interested in solving, and that's kind of hit or miss. Sometimes people get excited and they go solve something that might be boring but really needs to be solved, and sometimes people go out to solve the exciting problems, and we're left dealing with some of the more boring stuff on our own.
We're almost out of time, and I'm always sad when I have to say that. I mean, an hour goes by so quickly for stuff like this. I've got both Michael and I have like probably 20 more questions we could ask easily, and we're taking questions from the chat room that we can't even bring into the show already. But is there anything we didn't cover yet that you want to make sure our audience is aware of before we have to let you go?
No, I think we've got it pretty well covered. I mean, for those of you out in the community who may have an interest in helping, one of the places our release cycle is pinned to Ubuntu's release cycle. So we could release in February and August. Ubuntu releases in April and October. We would love to have somebody help us to work a package into the default repos for Ubuntu so that you can just apt-get install Mycroft. That would be fantastic. The same for SUSE and the other distros out there. I don't want to get into the distro wars. That would be enormously helpful, and that's a classic. This is not the most interesting problem to solve, but we really could use help with it because we're so scattered doing other things. And then people out there, you can contribute to this really broad AI project as simple as going to voice.mozilla.org and reading 5 phrases. And if that's all you ever do, it's still an important contribution to the broader community. And then, of course, if you have an interest in helping us at Mycroft, even buying a Mark I, setting it in your kitchen, choosing to donate data, and using it from time to time is a significant contribution because, of course, that allows us to improve the underlying software. So we'd love to have you as a member of our community and as a Mycroft customer.
That's incredible because, there's so many ways people can contribute to open source and not realize it. I mean, I even tell people that even just submitting a feature request can sometimes guide the authors or the contributors to go, oh, I didn't know that was a needed thing, and so now I'll work on that. And so it solves problems on both sides. It creates more features for the product, and it also creates a new satisfied customer. So, but just being able to read phrases, this is a new one. I haven't heard one that was like this before. So I may even go try that. I have the fancy mic. I have all the good gear around here. So, and maybe we'll do one as Kermit. We'll see how that all works. 2 final questions, or my audience will yell at me since you are a developer. What's your favorite text editor?
Notepad++.
Are you serious?
Yeah. That's my favorite text editor.
Goofing with you. And then your favorite programming language?
I would typically write things in either Python or Bash. Like I am a true old school hacker. The software I write never works well. It always works. It never works well. Steve Penrod and the development team are super professional, very capable, have their whole process in place. If you need it to work in 15 minutes, I'll write it in Bash and get it done, and it'll work for a week until it breaks. If you need it done right, work with Steve and his team. They do a great job. Awesome.
Joshua, please come back on in a couple of years and let us know what progress you've made. And please let it work on a Mac desktop. Or is there a Docker image? Maybe I could have done the Docker image.
I believe there is a Docker image, but please don't quote me on that. I'm not always as plugged into the dev side of things as I probably should be.
Okay. Great. Well, like I said, come back in a couple of years. Tell us how it's progressed. I'm sure there'll be a lot of exciting developments given the velocity with which you've already achieved. And we look forward to more hardware, more software, more places where this is, and being able to run on my Mac desktop. So thank you much, Joshua.
Hey, thank you so much.
Alrighty. That was Joshua Montgomery talking to us about this really cool project. What do you think there, Michael?
I mean, I'm a huge fan of Mycroft anyway because I've been I've been watching it for a long time, and I've been using it for the Plasma integration for a while too. And just having the opportunity to talk to Joshua about it is awesome. It's a fantastic experience.
Cool. All right, well, we're almost out of time here. I'm running up right against some hard deadlines. So let me run through the upcoming guests because those are all kind of fun. Ionic is next week, and that's a free open source mobile UI toolkit for developing high-quality cross-platform apps for native iOS, Android, and web, all from a single code base. I'm very interested in this show because I am a Flutter advocate, which does roughly the same thing, but is written in Dart rather than written in JavaScript. So we'll see how that goes. That'll be a good challenge there. Aquameta, who have been on the show before a couple of years ago, but it's an abuse of Postgres is really the only thing I can start by saying. It's a web development environment where instead of storing code as flat files in the file system, everything is stored in Postgres as relational data, including the source code, the HTML, the CSS, JavaScript, images, and other resources, system configurations, database schema and permissions, and more. So they were on a couple of years ago. We were sort of amazed by that, but they made a significant progress and want to be on the show again to talk about what they've changed. Cyclone DX, also on the upcoming schedule. It's a lightweight software bill of materials specification designed for use in application security context and supply chain component analysis. Redis, who have been on the show, I think a couple of years ago, somewhere in there. They're an open source in-memory database structure used as a database, cache, and message broker. So basically a key value store. And it looks like it should be pretty fun. They've apparently updated a bunch of stuff since the last time they were on the show. I think they were just recently forked the last time they were on the show, and they've done a lot of their own independent development now. RavenDB is a NoSQL document database. We'll have a couple of NoSQL shows in a row. Barros Backup, Barros, I saw them up at Scale. They're a 100% open source fork of the Backup project from Bacula.org. So it's been in development since late 2010 and has a lot of new features. Just added to the schedule, one of the people I was interacting with at Cloud Foundry is the IBM Cloud Platform. So a full stack cloud platform that spans public, private, and hybrid development environments. It's built with a robust suite of advanced data and AI tools and draws on deep industry expertise to help you on your journey to the cloud. primarily built with open source components. We're going to talk about their influence on the components and also talk about what they're also getting from upstream. But of course, it's going to be a tiny bit of a sales pitch for the using IBM Cloud as opposed to the other vendors. However, the nice thing about all this stuff at Cloud Foundry is that you don't have vendor lock-in. So even if you start with IBM Cloud, you can move somewhere else. So that's always kind of nice. Those all could be found on their big spreadsheet for the show, which is at twit.tv/floss. If you go there, it's the homepage for the show. If you have any other suggestions, again, please tell the project leader or community coordinator to email me, especially if it's not cryptocurrency or blockchain. I'm really tired of those shows. We have a live stream at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time on Wednesdays. Oh, I forgot to ask Joshua if they have blockchain in this thing. Oh, well, never mind. It was already a long show. So we have a live stream. We take a number of questions there. We took a couple questions actually from also co-host Jonathan Bennett, who asked a couple things in there. That's 9:30 a.m. Pacific time, Wednesdays at live.twit.tv. You can follow us at Floss Weekly on Twitter. You can follow me at Merlin on Twitter. And no, I do not yet have a solution that replaces Google Plus yet. If you have a thing where I can import a Google Plus export into some place that's sort of like Google Plus, where we can have multiple people post things, please let me know. Merlin@Sunsynch.com. I'm really looking for something to replace Google Plus. I was just at Cloud Foundry. I talked to some potential guests there. One of the big ones there was Comcast. Comcast is a huge consumer of open source software and a huge contributor on the backside. So I want to get their open source coordinator and their platform coordinator on the show, hopefully in the next month or so, whenever the next open slot is. So I want to talk about, we talk about, projects here, but we don't often talk about customers, consumers, and contributors, especially when it has commercial interest. So I'm really hoping that will come together soon. I will be at the Perl conference in mid-June. That'll be in Pittsburgh. I will be at OSCON in Portland in mid-July, as presuming my press passes come through for both of those. I'm pretty sure they will. Anything you want to plug, Michael?
Yeah, actually, I have a couple podcasts if you want to check out. My This Week in Linux is a news podcast where I do deep dives into a lot of different topics, anywhere between 12 to 20 topics every week. And you also have Destination Linux, where it's a conversational podcast where we talk about things that are news and all kinds of stuff, but more of a discussion about things that are happening in the Linux ecosystem and Linux community.
Cool. All right. Well, I look forward. I think I'm subscribed to both of those, or maybe at least one of those. Shows up on my podcast stream from time to time. Michael, welcome back to the show. I usually sit at the beginning of the show. What the heck am I doing now? They let anybody do the show. Thanks for being a co-host on the show. I look forward to your next appearance here on the show. Don't make it so long next time.
I'll try not to.
And thanks for your insight. And thanks for being experienced in this particular topic. So that really helped me sort of flesh out some of the questions that I had as well. So anyway, we're all out of time. So we'll see you all again next week on Floss Weekly.